Hi everyone. Perhaps the most difficult issue any of us as a manager will ever have to confront is an underperforming team member. In my experience, no issue encourages more avoidance, even in the most senior and experienced executives. And at the same time, no issue destroys as much value. So it's really important we address it. The cost of inaction is quite significant really for all concerned. If you think about the individual in question, chances are they suspect they're underperforming. And if they do, they will bring and have a level of anxiety pretty much every day at work. Their confidence will be affected. Eventually it becomes very debilitating. If they don't know, then chances are at some point in the future, they're going to be completely blindsided. Obviously, it's not great for them either way. Then there's the cost to your team. If you have 10 people in your team and let's say 2 of them are underperforming, you're now underweight by 20%. The collective impact and output suffers. Chances are your team know that 2 members are underperforming too, and so all the hallway talk is undermining team harmony. And the other thing to understand about your team is that when there is underperformance in that team, the team drops to a level of mediocrity. It does not raise to a level of excellence. The final thing is to think about the cost on you. If you are having to step in to do their job, who is doing your job? Martyrdom is not leadership. So if you do decide you want to address this issue of underperformance, and I'd encourage you to, what it will boil down to usually is one of 2 main issues: skill or will. Is it about capability, intellect, expertise, or is it about attitude, desire, commitment? So let's deal with skill first. Here are 5 or 6 questions that you can ask yourself to figure out whether this person has a chance of being successful and what you might do as the manager. The first question to ask yourself is, can you define the specific skills that this person needs to improve? You need to be really specific. The second thing is, can you define the quantum of improvement that they need to make in each of those skills in a way that can either be measured or at least observed? The third thing is, can you define pathways for them to acquire those skills, either through exposure, training, a mentor, or something like that? Next, you want to think about, is there sufficient time for them to acquire these skills? Then you might ask yourself, is there anything more you can do as the manager in order to set them up for success? And perhaps finally, just do a check-in with yourself and ask whether deep down you believe that they can make it. Now, if the answer to these questions is no, or most of them are no, then you have very, very little chance of this person turning it around. You basically have someone in a role for which they don't have the necessary skills, but because they don't have an attitude problem, the goal would be to try and find a role for this person where they can be successful, where they do have the skills. If the answer is yes to all or most of these questions, then what you need to do is very, very clearly define the specific gaps for this individual so they understand what they are. Let them know that you believe in them, instill a sense of agency in this person, and then do everything you can to support them to acquire those skills. Now, if the issue is will, that's a little more tricky. So again, I'll give you 6 questions you can ask yourself to figure out whether this person has a chance of making it or not. Firstly, can you define the specific standards of behavior that this person needs to improve on with examples, specific examples of where they have fallen short? Secondly, can you define the quantum of improvement they need to make in each of these standards of behavior in a way that can be observed? Thirdly, ask yourself, do they have sufficient time to turn it around? And perhaps related to that, is there enough stakeholder support for them to turn it around, or have they burnt too many bridges? Most importantly, will this team member take ownership of this issue, or will they make excuses and blame others? And finally, do you deep down believe they can make the necessary changes? Now, what I can tell you is, if you answer no to all or even most of these questions, this individual has next to no chance of turning it around. And the longer the status quo goes on, the more damage you're doing to yourself, your team, and your organization. If the answer to these questions is yes, you think that you could answer yes to all of these questions, then it is possible for them to turn it around, but only if they really, really want to. In this situation, your job is to be very clear about the behaviors you need to change the time frame they need to change within, and the consequences for not changing. It really is important to be very, very explicit about the size of the challenge. I'd even encourage you to give them a day to think about it and ask them to make a choice one way or the other. Are they really up for it or are they not? Let them know that if they want to give it another go, they really need to convince you that they're up for it. Then, if they say that they are, pay very close attention to their energy, body language, and tone of voice. It's possible for someone to turn around a will issue, but it requires absolute commitment from the team member as the start point. Absolutely no excuses. Confronting underperformance in a team member is probably the most difficult thing a manager can ever do. It's also one of the most important. Done well, there is perhaps no greater way to positively affect the performance of a team or the culture of an organization.